many educators said that they didn't have sick pay, they didn't have any kind of maternity cover pay. 1 in 5 said that they were working an extra job, kind of just to help make ends meet. Many said that they weren't able to cover any sort of extra unexpected expenses, such as if their car broke down or needed repairs, they needed a new washing machine. So really the message that we're getting from educators is that low pay and poor working conditions are really making them question their future in the sector.
Hello and welcome back to the Mothership, the show that brings the issues that matter most to Irish families to the table. I'm Laura Cunningham, and on this week's show we're talking about childcare. With years-long waiting lists and soaring fees, staff shortages, it's a system that's under a lot of pressure. Joining us this week is Elaine Dunne from the Federation of Early Childhood Providers.
Hi everybody.
And social scientist Dr. Greer Murphy.
Hi, how are you?
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Childcare is such a vital cog in the wheel of so many people's lives, and I think, many of us, me included, have learned the hard way how difficult it is to be without over the last couple of years because of the various closures and that kind of thing. So, given that it's such an important part of, society, how is it, a sector that's just so under-supported, I suppose, is the question that we're here to ask today. So, Elaine, I'm going to go to you first. So we hear from our readers all the time, and I know myself that, there's people on waiting lists that are years long. A lot of people just can't get a place at all. So there is a supply and demand issue there. So we approached the government and we asked the Department of Children, about the supply and demand issue, and their response was probably a little frustrating, really. They say, on the whole, and I'm quoting, supply is meeting demand with some evidence of undersupply for certain cohorts in certain areas, including children under 3. Which kind of sounds like, no, everything's fine except for this part, which is the issue, really, for most people. So that's quite a frustrating response.
It's a big part.
It is a very big part, yeah. And certainly when you're going back to work and you're looking for a place for your child, that it's everything to you. So, it's frustrating that was kind of maybe seen as a bit of an afterthought there. Elaine, you as a, member of the Federation, but also as a childcare provider, you know better than anyone, is supply meeting demand?
No, not at all. So we have waiting lists in my service. So I have a 2-year waiting list. And then we have 20 WhatsApp groups across the country, and they have waiting lists as well. I know one service down the country that has can only work doing etche hours at the moment because she cannot get the staff, even though she is a full day care provider.
Okay.
So she's struggling. She's in a rural area. There are other places up in Galway that have the waiting list could be up to 4 years. Okay. So it just depends on where you are. It's very difficult for parents. We have mums ringing us who are pregnant.
Yeah,
looking for places and in panic saying, can you please take my child? So you are getting those calls, and we are getting a lot of those calls lately because people just can't get the places. And it's awful to see.
It doesn't surprise me because obviously if you're hearing that these waiting lists are 3 and 4 years long, you don't really need it after 3 or 4 years. Yeah. So you kind of, you're stuck. And I know there are, there's this presumption that it is more difficult in cities, but I guess if you live in a rural area and there is only one childcare facility there, then you're also, you're in trouble there as well. So, I think this is the thing that a lot of people think. They just think, well, hire more staff, take on more kids, expand it. If you have these waiting lists, do you not want the business? Like, people don't really understand the difficulties around staffing. So, you've seen it yourself, Amy, the waiting lists are massive. You've seen it personally, you've seen it kind of, through your work. Why are those waiting lists so long, and why can't we expand the services?
Yeah, so one good reason why the waiting lists are so long is perhaps they're not reflective of the true demand that is out there. So what I've seen is I've spoken to parents and I've spoken to providers that have said that parents are putting their children down for multiple creches. They're desperate, they need something. So they're calling all the providers and saying, just stick me on the list. The list grows and grows. Perhaps that's not reflective of the true number. Yeah. So one solution could be administering the list centrally at a county council level, as opposed to it being the responsibility of private providers to manage that wait list. Might give a better reflection, like they do in, for example, in Denmark. Yeah. Waiting lists are administered at the city council level. That might give a better indication of the true length of a waiting list.
Yeah, it is an absolute mess. I lived that experience myself, where I was putting my child down on multiple lists, and like that, fully aware that my child was probably down on multiple lists the same way lots of other kids. So how long is this list actually, and how many of those people are actually going to take up a place? And from a provider's perspective as well, you have this list, but you don't really know if people are still on it. Like, it is a bit of a mess, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, look, if you have somebody on the list, once you have guaranteed them the place, you take a deposit.
Yes.
You know, and at that point, it's up to the parent then, and that's how you know whether they're going to actually take the place or not. So also in the Dublin group, so there's over 250 people in the Dublin group. So a lot of us link in together to see whether we have a crossover of names in our local areas. So that's been a really good asset to the Federation, you know, to help us that there's no crossover.
We're hearing from a lot of people that they can't even get on a list. So they're ringing saying, you know, my child is whatever age, and they're being told we can't even put you on the list. There's no point in even joining. There is an issue, of course, around babies. So over the age of 2, it becomes maybe slightly easier. Can you explain that to us?
So children under the age of 2, that's a very difficult one for us because it's not a viable part of the business. Because you're highly regulated, your staff ratio is high to the babies, and rightly so. That it should be that way, and I have no issue with that. But it's not a viable part of a business for us anymore.
So you need 2 staff for 6 babies.
For 6 babies.
Yeah. So it costs you money essentially.
It costs money, and the cost is put on the parents.
Yeah.
And we're just going to have to keep upping the fees on the parents, which is something we don't want to do. No. We want the government to step up here and properly invest in our sector. Yeah. And that hasn't happened.
Because I think, you know, for parents, they might think, you know, they hear about childcare workers, and we will touch on that, not being paid properly, and then you hear these extortionate fees, and there might be this attitude like, where is this money going? You know, are these facilities earning millions? And of course we know that's not the case. So can you talk us through some of the challenges that you have around, obviously you have inflation like all the rest of us, rents, rates, staffing, all of those kind of things. Insurance, that's a big issue, I believe.
That's a big issue.
Yeah.
So insurance has trebled in the last 2.5 years. So that's one big issue for us.
That's surely closing
rates
businesses.
have gone up. Food. So this year for the food that we get in from a company, the price has risen by 9%.
Wow.
Like, so all of these things are going up. And then, like, for a lot of the average providers, we may not have upped our fees for about 5 years.
Okay.
You know, that we've said it at a standstill. And now all of a sudden we're being asked to cap our fees, and everything has gone up dramatically this year, as we all know. For a family to function this year, it's going to cost you another 4,000. So there's all of that going on. So when ECCC started back in 2010, my fees would have been €280.
Okay.
So ECCC fees today is 280. That's in 12 years.
12 years.
12
so
years.
For anyone who doesn't understand this, that's the ECCE year, which is the free year that that parents get before their child goes to school. So you were receiving €280 12 years ago.
From parents, that would have been the fee. And we would have worked from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock, okay?
Yeah.
So then we had to backtrack and go from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And then, so that was a huge hit of, you know, our program was a 4-hour program. Yeah. And it was well worked out because it was a Montessori class, you know. And then that all had to change as well. And then you couldn't ask parents for any extra at all. Yeah. So a lot of the ECCC services are capped, but they have like an optional extra. So in some counties they're allowed optional extras, and in other counties they're not.
So it's not standardised?
It's not standardised at all. It's a bit of a mess, to be quite honest. I mean, ECCC needs to be hiked up big time and catch up with the rate of inflation. Yeah. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. Yeah. Quite concerned about the core funding that's coming in because we're still going to be miles behind the EU. At the moment, we are, I think, third last in the EU.
In terms of funding for childcare. Yeah.
So at 0.1%, and the EU are funded by 0.8%.
That's a massive difference.
So then you hear about, you know, the workforce development and the funding model plan and everything that's going on, and they're saying, oh, well, you know, we're going to double the funding between now and 2028. But we will still be miles behind in 2028. Yeah. They need to double the funding today. 2028 is going to be too late because a lot of us will be gone.
That's it.
We really will. I know of 4 services already in the last week have notified me that 1 has already gone this week and there's 3 more going in June. Yeah. Full daycare services in the country.
So, I mean, this isn't working from a childcare, someone who owns a creche perspective. It's failing parents. So Amy, on behalf of SIP2, you carried out the Early Years Professional Survey, and you have essentially discovered exactly why there is this mass exodus of staff from the sector. So particularly low pay for these highly skilled individuals is it in a nutshell, isn't it? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so this is our 3rd year carrying out the survey, and each year what we found is that low pay and poor working conditions are really the top issue affecting professionals in the sector. So in terms of some statistics, 40% of managers that we surveyed said that they were earning less than €15 an hour, and 66% of everyone that we surveyed said that they were earning less than €12.90, which is the living wage, which is, you know, far from a generous wage. It's the baseline that would be expected to be able to attain a very basic standard of living. And some other things that we found were, for example, many educators said that they didn't have sick pay, they didn't have any kind of maternity cover pay. 1 in 5 said that they were working an extra job, kind of just to help make ends meet. Many said that they weren't able to cover any sort of extra unexpected expenses, such as if their car broke down or needed repairs, they needed a new washing machine. So really the message that we're getting from educators is that low pay and poor working conditions are really making them question their future in the sector.
Okay. It's a vocation, like it's not just a job, isn't it? Yeah. So, I mean, you really would want to love it.
Yeah.
But, you know, understandably, from a provider's perspective, they can't just suddenly start paying more money because you're barely holding it together.
In on that, yeah, absolutely. So we have found across the country, so we ran our own survey as well just before Christmas, where 1,009 providers took it. Okay. So out of 62% of them are paying above the living wage. And a lot higher.
To retain the staff.
To retain their staff.
Okay.
And then the other thing we found also was that there are providers who go without their own wages to subsidise their staff wages. So again, it's down to government lack of investment.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's where the whole issue is. And really, we need parents to understand that.
Yes.
It's not the provider and it's not the staff. It's not our fault. This is down to chronic underfunding for many, many years.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there is this Joint Labour Committee, there's the Workforce Development Plan, there's the First 5 plan the government are calling it, where it's this basically strategy for ensuring that early years is covered in a number of different ways, and we're promised this new funding model. There's a lot of talk going on in there. There's a lot of organisations being set up and boards and things being formed and reports being done, but really we need them to put their money where their mouth is. So the promise is double in 6 years' time. Again, as you said, even if we get to double, it's still nowhere near European standard, and it's in 6 years' time when presumably we're going to lose a lot more facilities in the meantime.
Absolutely, a lot more services will close. I mean, I was quite shocked this week to hear of the 4 that are going.
Yeah.
And they're full daycare service.
Yeah.
2 in rural and 2 here in Dublin. And that's quite shocking.
All the time. Yeah.
Well, I think it's down to, the lack of government funding and investment from them, and it's the lack of understanding that, we feel we're portrayed as being greedy providers, and it's quite the opposite.
No.
I mean, I work on the floor from 7:30 in the morning till 6 o'clock every evening. I come home and I do my admin. I work weekends doing my admin. I get a very little family time at the moment.
Yeah.
Because of the burden of admin that's been put on us from government schemes as well. And that's really difficult. And then you want to pay your staff more. I respect every single girl that works for me, and one of the guys as well. We have a guy working for us as well. They're outstanding workers, and they should be paid more, absolutely. But then the government needs to step up, as I said, double the investment. Completely. Now.
I mean, you're doing all you can, and say from a parent's perspective, I feel I absolutely love my child's facility and everyone in it, and I couldn't do their job, and I'm so grateful for them. And it does stick in my gut that they are not being paid enough to do that, but can I as a parent pay them more than I am now? Unfortunately not. When we look at the fees, go ahead.
Why should the parents take the hit?
Yeah, and we are taking
fees
the hit.
going up, and you will continue to take the hit, unfortunately, until the government step up and double the funding there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the unfortunate thing. Like this year, they've spoken about us capping our fees.
Yeah.
That's just wrong at this time. So 2020 government gave us nothing in the budget. Okay,
nothing
we got
at all.
Nothing, zero. We were quite shocked when we were so disappointed. So then we did the protest.
Yes.
33,000 people, parents, grandparents, workers, providers, we all worked together.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did it get us? Nowhere. We got a little bit more investment than we've ever had. And in fairness to our minister, he's outstanding because he has got us a lot more than we've ever had.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more work to be done.
So what happened in the 2021 budget?
We got the 207 million.
207 million, okay.
But out of that 207 million, there was funding that we've always had. Yeah. So there's 28 million that goes to higher cap, and there's 19 million that go to PSP, which is programme support payments, okay? So they're put into that 27 million. So really we are only getting 160 million.
Okay.
Okay, so just so everyone's aware of that, because when they say the 207, it sounds really good on paper. It's like everything that looks great on paper, but the reality is.
And when you break it down to that percentage that we mentioned earlier, it's really not good enough. So let's talk about fees. The most up-to-date stats that we have from 2020 are when the department did their review, are €184 a week is the average. The lowest being 148, I think, was in Carlow, and the highest being 251 in, I think it was in South Dublin. Now, they're, those, it's just not uncommon to pay a lot more than that. If I can say, it's not uncommon to pay €1,300 per month in Dublin, in a Dublin creche. So those figures, you could kind of take them with a pinch of salt, to be honest with you. I just want to touch on the National Childcare Scheme as well, because I know it confuses a lot of people, and for anyone watching this who's about to enter into this hellscape, I want to kind of explain what's going on there. So there's a universal subsidy, which is available to most people, and it's for children up to 36 months. And that, you basically essentially get 50 cents an hour back, which works out about €22.50 for a full 45-hour week. So that, we have our readers, they'll give us their opinions about these things, and basically they're saying I have to jump through absolute hoops to get €100 a month. When you're probably paying €1,200 a month, it's just thanks for nothing, basically. After that, then there's the income-related subsidy, which is calculated and it's awarded per hour. Families earning over 60k for a household can't get near it, so you have to be under that. So if you think about it, a family where there's two parents that work in, jobs that maybe are like 30 up to 35, like anything, they're gone. They don't get it. So we have to be earning. So it has to be quite two low paid jobs. They don't get a look, and they don't get near this. So for anyone in that sort of like middle income bracket who has two kids, they're both working, it's almost impossible to go back to work for, say, if it is a straight couple, for the mother to go back to work after having a second child, because you're talking about paying, $2,500 on childcare. It gets to the point where it's just not worth your while, I'd imagine, So, I suppose all this to say that parents can't really pay anymore. The facilities themselves are stretched, closing, everything is up against them. So this really needs to be supported at government level. Whether you have a child or not, childcare is part of the structure of our whole society. We were all kids once, and we all, for us to move forward, it's a huge part of the structure of our economy, and at the moment it's just not being treated that way. Is that right?
No, it's not. Yeah. And the other part of it is that it's the women that have been taken out of the workforce if they can't get the childcare.
Yeah.
And that's quite worrying as well. I thought we'd moved on, women's rights had moved on, and it just doesn't seem to have at all.
And 98% of those working in the sector are women.
Okay.
And last year we had the Citizens Assembly on Gender Equality, and they came out, one of their key findings was we need we need a properly funded, affordable and accessible early childhood and education system in Ireland. And the government for the past decade or so has consistently called for a quality sector, for professionalisation. So early years professionals have gone out, they've gotten their level 5, 6, 7, some educated to master's level. So the providers and the educators have been doing their best, but the government has not been doing their best. They need to start really upping the amount of money that they're pumping into the system, and that needs to be a really profound, extreme increase in what we're seeing now. So the OECD recommends spending 0.8% of GDP on early childhood services. Yes. Ireland is currently spending about 0.6%. By comparison, the Nordic countries are spending 1%. So that's every single year they're pumping huge amounts of money in to fund the administration, the infrastructure, the staff, the food, the catering, the kind of the policy, the research that needs to go into making sure the services are as good as they can be for the children, who are ultimately the people that matter in this.
It's such a tiny, tiny percentage of funding. When you think about, they are actually people, they're not just, I don't know, we say like they're not just random babies. Like, these are people, we need to look after them.
And you have to remember, government have ignored us for many years. And it's only since the protest that we are making a mark. And it may come down to maybe one day having to come back out again.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, parents need to come on board here with us.
Yes.
And understand that we are fighting for them and their children and for the rest of society moving forward to ensure that we have everything that is needed for the child within the service. You know, we want to keep our staff, but we've lost an awful lot of staff out to other sectors, into mainstream schools for SNA jobs where they've got good jobs prospects and everything else, you know, and we can only do so much with what we've got.
Who has that love for childcare. That's a certain type of person, an amazing person, can I just say. And for them to just not be able to do it because it's just not financially viable, it's really quite sad.
I mean, you look at even providers, like, I mean, some of us have struggled to get mortgages.
Okay,
for our own homes, or have struggled to get car loans and things. Like, it's not just the staff, and I love the staff, and I have so much respect for everybody that works in our sector, but we are all struggling, providers and staff. Absolutely, and that's what government need to be made very aware of. It's all of us together. We are in this together, unified.
There's no need to separate out, you know, are you professional, are you an educator, are you a provider? It's everyone working in the sector needs to work together to solve the problem.
Absolutely, I mean, I suppose for anyone watching this, you know, how can they lend their support? I mean, I would imagine that next time we do have an election, this needs to be, you know, on those politicians on the doorstep need to be asked, well, what are you going to do about this?
Absolutely.
And when are you going to do it? And how much are you going to do it? And, you know,
prioritise this sector. Absolutely prioritise it now, because it's the workforce of women. You know, and it's women that it's going to affect.
Absolutely.
One of the key findings in our research year on year as well has been that educators feel a lack of recognition, a lack of value by society.
Is it any wonder?
So if I could say one thing, it would be, of course, you can contact your TD, your counsellors, lobby them, but also speak to the professionals that are caring for your children and let them know that you see them, you see the great work that you're doing. Have conversations with people in your community, because we need to raise the profile of this really important work, the great work that providers are doing to great financial difficulty themselves, and lift them up and say they are doing an amazing job caring for our country's children.
Absolutely.
And we've been lobbying now for the last few months to all the TDs across the country, and we've got all the providers lobbying them as well. And there's been a good few meetings now, so the TDs across this country are very aware of the issues within this sector.
You're not going to go away.
No, we're not going to go away, but that they need to step up, and it is down to them knocking on the door of your house when they're looking for your vote. I would ask all parents to be very strong.
To see someone knocking on your door now.
Oh yeah. I don't think it would end well for them.
So how do parents join in and support these facilities? Because as someone who is so grateful to be the lucky one that has a childcare facility that I love, I want to be able to support them. I just don't want them to go away. So what do I do?
I think that doing this show today has been fantastic, because I think it'll show parents, you know, what the real issues are on the ground, and like approach your provider, talk to them, you know, ask them, can you help, or, you know, get together a group of parents and lobby the TDs in your area for your creche to ensure that you don't lose that facility.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for. We could probably talk about this all day, because obviously there's a lot to unpack about that, but I think this is going to be really helpful for people who maybe don't understand just the level of kind of how broken the system is really, and indeed what needs to change. So it's time for us all to get on board, I think so. Guys, that's all we have time for, so we will leave it there. But as always, I'll leave all the information on everything we've spoken about today below. Until next week, stay safe.